Welcome back everybody to another reaction video from me. This time I'm gonna be reacting to Oversimplified's World War One Part 1 video. I'm gonna do this in react to Part 1 in one video and Part 2 in another. So I record that also. Um, as usual, the original video link will be in the description. So check it out, like it, and subscribe to that channel, and then come back here. Now, without further ado, commentiamo.
1902. A young man by the name of Benito Mussolini moves from Italy to Switzerland to avoid military service. He gets big into socialism, working for trade unions, writing for socialist newspapers, advocating a violent overthrow of European monarchies, the whole shebang. This gets him in a bit of trouble with the Swiss police, so he gets arrested, sent back to Italy, set free, returns to Switzerland, is arrested again, goes back to Italy again, completes his military service after previously avoiding it, and then after a brief stint as an elementary school teacher, he...
Hang on. Can we just imagine Mussolini as a school teacher? God.
Finally returns to work as an avid socialist. His speeches and journalistic abilities made him famous among Italian socialists. He was anti-war, so when Italy colonized Libya in 1910, he rioted and got arrested.
Also, something that I hadn't mentioned in my World War One reaction video is that in China the Xinhai, I don't know how to pronounce it, revolution happened when the Qing dynasty was overthrown and China became a republic.
Then World War I came along, and once again he protested Italy's involvement. But then he thought, wait a minute, this war could bring about the social climate needed to overthrow European monarchies and bring about the socialist revolution everywhere. And suddenly he was pro-war, but his fellow socialists didn't like his new pro-war stance, so they kicked him out of the party. So then he said, you know what, I'm done with socialism.
And this is also important, that it didn't start out as that shining beacon of fascism, that he was a socialist, and after what happened, he leaves socialism.
We need something new, not based on class divisions tearing us apart, but based on unity through nationality. We'll conquer the Mediterranean and reunite all Italian peoples just like the days of the Roman Empire. I'll call it fascismo, and it will guide the Italian nation to greatness. That's all well and good, Mr. Mussolini, but what kind of haircut am I giving you?
Bold.
Let's go with...
Bold.
Bold.
Bold. Nice. Bang.
Italy had been on the winner's side in World War I, and they hoped they were going to get a lot out of it, but in the end they only got a little, and they felt cheated. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that the Italian people were a little unhappy. So when Mussolini came along and said that he could fix everything, his fascist movement gained a lot of support.
And, well, in a term almost the same thing happened to Germany. What the main difference is they were on the loser side of World War One.
In 1922, he went to the king and said, make me prime minister or I'll make me prime minister. And the king said, you and what army? This army.
Fair point.
Fair enough.
And this is important. If you can get the army to support you, then you can practically do anything you want.
Then he went about establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had its first fascist dictator. Next up, Germany. Germany had been on the loser's side, and they got absolutely wrecked by the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah.
They lost territory, had to demilitarize the Rhineland, had to reduce their army to just 100,000 men, couldn't have an air force, had to pay the Allies a huge amount of money that it didn't have, and a new rule was established that every Englishman withheld the right to walk into the center of Berlin, pick out any German they wanted, and spank the hell out of them. I made that last one up, but it helps you understand how all of this felt to Germans. On top of that, a bad economy and weak governments meant that when a small angry man with a silly mustache came along and said that he could fix everything, the German people loved it.
Yeah, I know that there have two oversimplified videos about Hitler. And as they probably gonna say it now, Hitler have been in a soldier in World War One, but later on he was, I believe he was blinded by a gas attack, and I believe that was the point when that was also a factor that led him to become the genocidal maniac he became. And I'm sure they talk about it, but he attempted coup in Munich called the Beer Putsch, which was inspired by Mussolini. But well, obviously that failed. But like not just Hitler, but military generals were part of that coup, like Erich Ludendorff, for example.
Hitler had been a soldier during World War I, and he was crazy patriotic, and nobody was madder than him about Germany's humiliation. He helped start a new political party.
And actually, Hitler was born in Austria. Okay, so I'm telling you, he wasn't German, he was Austrian.
And in 1923 attempted a march on Munich.
Well, after the war, because of the treaty, Hitler couldn't be a soldier anymore, but instead he became a spy and was sent to infiltrate the German Workers' Party, which they believed was communist, but as it turned out, it wasn't communist at all. And it was so not communist that Hitler ends up joining that party, and later he became the leader of that party, which then he transformed into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or NSDAP party. Yeah, I mean, after World War One, that period was like it was a pretty, let's say, difficult period for many nations. For example, in Germany, the Spartacus group, communist group that by Karl Liebknecht, I believe, did correct me if I'm wrong. Can't remember precisely, but they they made many revolutions throughout the country, and because the army size was limited, the government had to rely on many Freikorps units that were formed around the about at the end of World War One, and these Freikorps units were present at the Baltic states as well, because after the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, Germany got the Baltic states as a Baltic states, and after that the United Baltic Duchy was declared, but later that one collapsed also, and there were many Freikorps units who served there and fought against the Baltic countries and also the Bolsheviks. Them and also many other troops like the Baltische Landes were, for example.
With his boys. and then he got arrested. But his popularity grew and grew, and in 1933, the president made him chancellor. He believed he was Germany's great destined savior, and he went full megalomaniac, establishing a dictatorship with himself at its center. Europe had fascist dictator number two. Hitler and Mussolini had a lot of the same ideas.
Let's see. Radical nationalism, totalitarianism, also violent militarism, Hitler is extremely racist, and Italian
But
is
more
quite
importantly,
racist.
they had the same enemies, and they started to get along. Anyone else want to be friends? Franco? No?
Yeah, well, Spanish Civil War was one of those called proxy wars, which happened quite a lot in the Cold War, throughout the Cold War, and as Italy and Germany supported the nationalists led by General Franco, and this was a time when they tested many new equipment in the Kondor region, for example, and the Soviet Union supported the Republican side and specifically the communist side. Now, let's continue.
You good? I do. Who's that?
Japan.
It's Japan, and they've taken over northern China. Let's rewind a bit. Japan had isolated itself from the rest of the world for over 200 years until the Americans showed up and said, you're going to trade with us and you're going to like it. Then the Western powers imposed a bunch of unequal treaties, meaning Japan's economy was bust. They also had no natural resources, so they decided to go get some. They went to war with
Remember this natural resource thing. It will be important later.
China to gain a sphere of influence over Korea, and they took a bunch of China's stuff. But then the West said, hey, cut that out. And since Japan couldn't take on the West, they said, okay, I guess we'll just go home. Wait a minute, what are you doing? Taking advantage of a weakened China and setting up spheres of influence. But I was the one who weakened them. We know. And you guys didn't let me have anything. We know. That seems unfair. We don't think so. Okay, see ya. So Japan thought, screw this, and went to war with Russia, and stunned everyone by actually winning. Then they fully annexed Korea, but they didn't stop there. In World War I, they took Germany's colonies and islands in Asia. And then in an incident that was maybe staged by the Japanese army, a bomb blew up a Japanese train in Manchuria, giving them an excuse to launch an invasion and take over.
Yeah, and then establish the puppet government in that region. Also quick to note that many Russian fascists, let's call them, were in that part of China, like Konstantin Radzaevsky, for example.
So here's the situation. Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Japan all believe they're racially superior, all feel hostility towards the Allies, and all want to militarize and take over more stuff. And so they did. Let's start with Germany. Hitler hated the Treaty of Versailles, and now he was ready to begin undoing it. In complete violation of the treaty, the first Luftwaffe squadrons were set up, conscription was introduced, and he pimped up his army.
The Schwerer Gustav. The Schwerer Gustav was one of those Wunderwaffen or wonder weapons that was actually used in World War II. It was originally planned to be used in the Battle of France, but that campaign ended that quickly, so it was then transferred to the Eastern Front and was used at the siege of Sevastopol.
The Allies did nothing. Then Hitler sent his army back into the demilitarized Rhineland, giving orders to immediately retreat if the Allies showed up. The Allies did nothing. With his military re-strengthened, he could now move on to step 2. He wanted to rapidly increase the Aryan population, and to do so, he needed Lebensraum, or in other words, he would have to take over the world. But for now, a good portion of Europe would do.
Yeah, so he was, he created this ideology while he was in prison when he wrote the book Mein Kampf, and this is important that he hated the Tsars as much as the Jews.
And he began eyeing up his neighbors. The Allies finally started to get worried, so they implemented a fairly useless diplomatic strategy called appeasement, and it went a little something like this. Hitler would say, I want that thing, and the Allies would say, you can't have that thing. Okay, you can have that thing, but no more. I want that thing.
And
repeat. In 1938, Hitler's army marched into Austria and just took it, with no resistance. Boom.
Bam.
This is Germany now. Next, he demanded to be given the Sudetenland, an area of Czechoslovakia with many ethnic Germans. The Allies held a meeting with Hitler in Munich and said, look, we're going to give you what... Hang on. This meeting is about my territory. Shouldn't I come to the meeting too?
Nope.
Anyway, we're going to give you what you want. Really? Yeah. Just like that? Yep. What's the catch? Just sign this piece of paper promising you won't invade the rest of Czechoslovakia.
So much about that.
Okay. Then Chamberlain returned home victorious, waving his signed piece of paper in the air,
Peace in our time.
declaring crisis to be averted and the continuation of world peace. And we built a statue of Chamberlain in his honor, and every day on the 30th of September we celebrate Chamberlain Day. Hitler's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia.
Yep.
What? He's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia. Oh. You lied to me. What do you expect? I'm Hitler. Not to be outdone, Mussolini also wanted to get in on the action. He thought to himself, isn't there a not yet colonized nation somewhere which is so underdeveloped that the people would be defending themselves against our tanks with literal bows and arrows and wooden spears? Oh, there is?
Yep.
Fantastic. And so he took it. Italy also wanted to control the entrance to the Adriatic Sea, so they occupied Albania. Then, in another incident which was maybe staged by the Japanese,
The Marco Polo Bridge incident.
gunfire was exchanged by Japanese and Chinese troops at the Marco Polo Bridge, and the Japanese launched yet another invasion against China. They swept through Beijing and Shanghai, and then advanced through the Yangtze Valley to China's then capital, Nanking.
And normally when we talk about atrocities in World War II, we think of the Holocaust, but Japan also did some horrible things, like the rape of Nanking, for example. Look it up.
It was here that saw the worst of Japan's shocking atrocities committed against the Chinese people. Back in Europe, Germany and Italy made their relationship status official.
Also, you can notice that Hungary's border has changed, and here's why. After World War One from 1918 until 1920, when the Treaty of Trianon was signed, it was a pretty kind of chaotic period for Hungary, because, well, for one, the Prime Minister at the time disarmed the army, so we couldn't fight against the forces of Yugoslavia, or at that time the Kingdom of Serbs, Slovaks, Serbs, Croats and Slovenes and Romania. Not only that, but Bela, after that, Bela Kun took over and began his 135 days long reign as the Hungarian Soviet Republic. He couldn't resist much against Romania, but he had a successful attacks to the north against Czechoslovakia, which was partially thanks to the help of Aurel Stromfeld. Then Bela was overthrown, and Miklos Horthy came in, and he became the regent of the Kingdom of Hungary. And well, from then on until the end of World War II, Hungary became kingdom in name only, the kingdom without the king. And because the Treaty of Trianon took over 70% of the land that was held by Hungary, then the Hungarian politics was greatly influenced by that loss. And so in 1938, after the Munich Agreement, Hungary didn't want to miss that out. So in the first Vienna Award, we got back packed some areas from the Czechoslovakia where Hungarians were the majority. Was this was near the border, so there were border regions. And also later in 1939, Hungary, through military action occupied this area here in the little known conflict known as the Slovak-Hungarian Little War.
By signing the Pact of Steel. Then, Hitler turned his eyes towards Poland and the hated Polish corridor splitting Germany in two. At this point, the Allies really had to put their foot down, and they warned him that an invasion of Poland would mean war. Hitler had planned to continue his advance eastward, but he didn't want to end up fighting a war on two fronts, so for now he made an alliance with Stalin, saying,
Well, I wouldn't call the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact as an alliance. It was a non-aggression pact, which meant that both of them agreed not to attack each other.
How about we both invade Poland and split it between the two of us, and I definitely won't not refrain from not betraying you sometime in the future.
Yeah.
Sounds...
Oh, ad coming up.
Automata kontroller érintésmentes működéssel. Ne ragadj le a feles...
This new alliance stunned the West.
Not an alliance, a non-aggression pact. The two things are...
On the 1st of September 1939, German troops entered Poland, and Britain and France declared war on Germany.
Yeah, but they didn't do much to stop Germany's advance into Poland. And the reason why they didn't declare war on the Soviet Union because that defense pact they made with Poland stated that if they were the subject of German aggression, that they would declare their war on Germany. So they didn't say anything. It didn't say anything about if anyone else attacked them. So when the Soviet came in, they couldn't. The Western Allies couldn't do anything because it was not covered by the treaty.
The Poles fought hard, but they were no match for the two giants crashing down on them from either side. Then came a period known as the Phony War, where everyone just sort of sat around not doing much. The French had launched a small invasion into the Saarland, but they maintained mostly defensive positions, and after a while decided to just turn around and call it a day. Speaking of France, the French were still super proud of their victory in World War I, and they hadn't really moved on from it. They still used horses, they dispatched messages by motorbike instead of using radio, orders from the commander-in-chief were usually pretty vague, and the troops were rarely inspected. They built a line of defenses along their German border, but didn't bother extending it all the way to the Channel, and they wouldn't launch artillery strikes against Germany out of fear of being retaliated against. In a war, they didn't want to attack the enemy. And at first the UK wasn't much better. Chamberlain still naively hoped that the war could be ended diplomatically. Instead of bombing raids, the RAF dropped propaganda leaflets over German cities, which one air marshal said likely did nothing but provide the continent with toilet paper for the duration of the war. They also only sent 200,000 men to France, while the French had mobilized millions. Both Britain and France wanted to avoid a repeat of the First World War, and so they wanted to keep the war as far from home as possible. So they turned their eyes north, towards Norway. Neutral Sweden was exporting iron ore to Germany through neutral Norway, so the Allies asked them if they could please stop exporting iron ore to Germany, but this request was refused. Then, the Soviet Union attacked Finland, so the Allies said, how about we land troops in Norway and move them across Sweden to go help out your good pal Finland, and along the way maybe take control of all your arms. But Norway and Sweden still said no. So the UK mined the waters around Norway to force any transport ships into international waters, and they also attacked a German tanker they found in the area. Hitler realized what the Allies were up to, and he quickly moved to secure his supply of iron ore. He launched an invasion through Denmark into Norway. The Allies rushed to land troops at key ports along the coast, but Germany had taken control of Norway's airfield, and their air superiority decided the fight. The Allies had to retreat.
And also later in the war, Germany used Norway for their atomic programs because they were mining heavy water there, which is one of the key components needed for the nuclear waters. But lucky for us, that didn't finish because of the Norwegian resistance for one, and also because the German atomic program was all but cancelled by 1942.
After this slightly embarrassing failure, Chamberlain resigned and was replaced with Winston Churchill, who had a slightly different approach to dealing with the Germans.
Yeah.
Hitler's overall strategy was similar to Germany's First World War strategy. Attack France, defeat France, knocking out the UK in the process, then turn on the Soviet Union and win the war. During the phony war, the Allies had given Hitler time to prepare his forces. Now, he was ready to attack. The Allies had wanted to place troops in Belgium, but Belgium had refused, and in a move that surprised pretty much no one, Hitler launched an invasion to get around France's defenses.
What?
The Allies charged into Belgium at full speed to meet the German invasion head-on, and it looked like a repeat of the First World War was coming.
Except
but this
no.
time, Hitler had a trick up his sleeve. Blitzkrieg. As the Germans advanced, they sent thousands of refugees westward, slowing down the Allies.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that. Interesting.
Then, to the south, the French had left the Ardennes, an area full of hills and forests, pretty under-defended because they thought it was naturally impenetrable, while the Germans were about to penetrate it with everything they had.
And also the Germans troops took what we call today meth to keep them away.
Smashed 50 Wehrmacht divisions through and encircled the Allied armies at lightning speed. The best of the Allied forces were now trapped. The Germans squeezed in from all sides, taking out France's best armies and nearly wiping out the British too, but they managed to make a desperate last-minute escape at Dunkirk.
I highly recommend you watch the film Dunkirk. Yes, I'm calling the film. I'm not American, okay? So I recommend you watch the film Dunkirk. It's made by Christopher Nolan, so there are some mind-bending things in it, but it's a great film. You should watch it.
British civilian ships even making the perilous journey to bring their young men home. With most of the French forces depleted, the Germans breezed through, taking Paris, and France fell. What the Germans couldn't do in World War I, Hitler had done just like that. Hitler hoped that with the fall of France, the UK would also lose hope and sue for peace. But quite annoyingly, it didn't, and he needed to secure the Western Front, so he tried to force them into submission with mind games. The UK were now all alone, and Hitler wanted to emphasize that. First of all, just before France fell, Italy finally declared war on the Allies, making the UK's situation even worse. Next, instead of just occupying all of France, Hitler occupied the coastal areas for defense, but allowed France to continue its existence as a German puppet state. This way, it looked like the UK's old ally had decided to switch sides.
And the British actually went down to Vichy France's naval base in Africa and sank many of their ships.
Hitler also hoped that the UK wouldn't attack any of her old allies' navy bases or colonies in Africa, giving Hitler an extra line of defense to the south. But the UK made sure to respond to this by sailing down to France's navy base in Algeria and wrecking a bunch of ships.
Seems like they learned that strategy from the Napoleonic Wars, where they set at Copenhagen and blew a bunch of stuff up.
So have at it. Hitler then began laying down plans
This way. Wrong way.
for an invasion of Great Britain. Before German troops could land on British soil, he would first need air and naval superiority across the Channel. Waves of German bombers came, while the completely outnumbered RAF worked bravely around the clock in an attempt to quell the German attacks. At first, the Luftwaffe targeted British ports and coastal facilities. Then it attacked RAF bases, crippling the RAF's ability to defend the nation.
But still, even if they won the battle over Britain, I still don't believe that they would have successfully invaded the UK. They just didn't have the ships for it.
And it looked like Hitler's Great British Invasion was coming. But then, Churchill ordered a small, pretty insignificant bombing raid over Berlin. It didn't do much damage, but Hitler was furious. And he immediately ordered the Luftwaffe to refocus its attacks on civilian targets in London. Children were sent off to the countryside away from their parents to avoid danger, and frequent trips to air raid shelters became a daily occurrence. But British morale held firm. Smiling, knitting, lounging casually, these people have balls of steel. This refocusing on London also gave the RAF breathing space to reorganize, so Hitler kind of shot himself in the foot there. Just the foot for now.
Just the foot, yeah.
Finally, the Luftwaffe sent one massive all-out attack on London, and the RAF successfully repelled it, destroying many of the German aircraft and placing air superiority firmly in British hands. Hitler's invasion had to be postponed, but the bombing of British cities continued for some time.
Alright, that was the end of part 1. I'll be reacting to part 1 too, don't worry. Let me know what you think. Write comments down below. And see you guys later. Thanks for watching.